In August of 2014, Scott Cawthon was ready to give up. He was a game developer, and his career was a series of either no-name titles or critical failures like Chipper & Sons Lumber Company. And like many people just breaking into their industry, he still hadn't found his big break. He was beaten down, felt bad about the terrible reviews he had gotten. He was on the verge of quitting. But he decided to produce one last game, what was planned to be his last game ever. Based on the reviews he'd gotten for Chipper & Sons saying that the creatures looked like Chuck E. Cheese ripoffs that would kill someone, he created an indie horror game titled Five Nights at Freddy's. And the rest is history. 10 years later, Five Nights at Freddy's is a cultural phenomenon. 13 more games, 28 books, Funko Pops, Halloween costumes, ugly Christmas sweaters, you name it. The once simple franchise about checking surveillance cameras and closing your door in time now features an infected computer program murderer, an animatronic avatar of death, and more dedicated episodes of game theory than you thought possible. And it all started with this game. 5 nights, 5 animatronics, $5 on Steam, and a whole lot of jump scares. The original Five Nights at Freddy's is a horror classic, a genuinely scary experience. It might be easy to dismiss it because of how prevalent the franchise has become, but if you played this game back when it first came out, you understand that it was no joke. FNaF appeals to our love for horror in a uniquely powerful way, to terrify us to our very core and keep us coming back for more. And today, we find out why. Welcome to Singularity. Open up a game of Five Nights at Freddy's and almost immediately you'll notice that something feels off about it. The sound design is eerie, the character models are just a little wrong. Even if you can't put your finger on it, something about this game is making your skin crawl. This isn't a fluke, it's incredibly intentional game design. Everything about Five Nights at Freddy's is designed to make you feel alone, unsafe, out of control. And it starts from the very setup, the conceit of the game. You're working as a night guard at a dilapidated, abandoned, dark, empty building. And there's no one else here with you. You're alone, isolated. And people aren't meant to be alone. Because several countries around the world use the barbaric practice of solitary confinement as a punishment in prison systems, we have a pretty good idea of what happens to people who are left alone for too long. Emotional distress, increased risk of aggression and homicide, psychosis. It changes your brain, physically shrinking the hippocampus, the part of your brain responsible for memory formation. In Sister Location, Baby even calls attention to this factor of the equation.
It's a strange thing to want to do, to come here. I'm curious what events would lead a person to want to spend their nights in a place like this, willingly.
And then there's the phone calls. Well, not really phone calls. They're recordings. It's not a real person. It's not real company. Just a reminder that you are alone. And when the recording ends, it feels even more isolating than before it began, giving you a taste of human interaction and then yanking it away. And what kind of a place is this that you're choosing to spend so much time at? An abandoned pizzeria? It's dark and dangerous and unsettling. It's liminal in a way. A study at Cardiff University looked into the phenomenon of liminality to figure out why these spaces creep us out so much. Their findings showed that the spookiest places had a direct relationship in time to the participant, places that would have been at the height of their popularity during the participant's childhood. Nostalgia plays a role in liminality. And with that in mind, turn your thoughts back to Five Nights at Freddy's. If you're around my age, you grew up spending birthdays at a place very like this, seeing the commercials every time you sat down to watch TV, begging your parents to fork over the money for you to see Charles Entertainment Cheese and the Gang. It was a place of happiness and fun. And now, It's not. It's worn down. The lights are out. The seats are empty. This place used to be filled with the excited screams of kids playing skee-ball, and now it's just filled with the monotonous whir of your fan. The mix of familiarity and unfamiliarity. A place that you know, but in a context that you don't. All of this is before you even play a second of the game. But Scott still has some tricks up his sleeve. The first 3 games in the FNaF franchise have a unique gameplay mechanic, the use of camera. Across all 3 games, you, as the player character, never actually move. You're experiencing your surroundings through camera feed, at a distance, and the most you can do is lock the doors into the room. Even that leeches precious battery power, so you have to conserve your resources carefully. This game wants you to feel out of control. And the first step is to make you feel in control. Think of a game like War. The rules are simple. High card wins. It's a luck-based game with no skill or strategy. So when you lose, you know it's just because of dumb luck. There was nothing you could have done to prevent it. But if you're playing Pokemon, ostensibly a game of skill where you're considering type matchups and who moves first and held items and damage calcs, and you lose because your confused Blaziken hurt itself, that's infuriating. It's still just dumb luck, but dumb luck in a game that does give you control. By giving the player just a bit of control, the ability to change your cameras, the ability to lock the doors, FNaF makes you aware of just how out of control you really are. The cameras are at awkward angles that don't let you see the whole room. Sometimes they cut out entirely, and if the animatronics eventually do catch you, you can lock the door. You can't actually do anything. You are not in control. The game forces you to be a victim. Speaking of the animatronics, let's finally talk about them. FNaF is a franchise that lives off of its strong character design. Automatonophobia is the fear of things that look human, but visibly aren't. Sure, it wouldn't be until Sister Location that we get actual human-based animatronics, but Freddy, Chica, Bonnie, and Foxy still fit the bill. It has to do with something called the uncanny valley, when something is just so close to being lifelike, but not quite there. It's easy to make fun of in a video game that didn't quite nail the graphics, but think of some of the most iconic horror designs of all time. Slenderman, Jeff the Killer, Harold the Scarecrow, Pennywise, all of them look human, or human enough. But there's something wrong. Something eerie that causes the hair on the back of your neck to stand up. The animatronics in this game are the same way. They almost look alive, and the true terror is found in that almost space. The slightly jerky, erratic movement, either a little too slow or a little too fast, the blank and empty eyes that give it unreadable expression. During a kid's birthday party, it's easy to make fun of the way that these things just don't look quite right. But if you're alone with them, all night in a dark, empty building, that's another story. And this game forces you to spend time with these terrifying monsters, completely alone and completely helpless. But there is still a game to be played. You can work around these animatronics. You can learn how they move and how to predict them. You can survive. As you watch Bonnie and Chica, you start to learn the unspoken rules of the game. And that's important. The rules are unspoken. Never once does the game help you. It just drops you in the deep end and forces you to splash around until you figure things out. But if you work at it, play night after night, endure death after death, you can figure it out. I mean, Bonnie and Chica do essentially the same thing. But it's during night 3 that things get rough. Because during night 3, the game changes the rules. This is another way that you're forced out of the driver's seat. Video games are and should be learnable, Master the boss's attack pattern, memorize the way through the dungeon's puzzle. If you try enough times, you should be able to win. But Five Nights at Freddy's constantly changes the rules on you. You've learned how to avoid Bonnie and Chica, you can get away from them. But during night 3, Freddy becomes active. Freddy is unique because he only attacks after you run out of power. He breaks the pattern set by Bonnie and Chica. This is another way that the game screws with you. FNaF 1 constantly establishes rules just to break them and make you feel completely out of control. Freddy attacks you when you run out of power. Foxy breaks all of the rules by being the only animatronic that you actually see move. He is the only one that actively and visibly chases you. Golden Freddy crashes your game, leaving you to wonder if that was even supposed to happen, or was that some weird glitch or bug? What just happened? You are a victim. FNaF is terrifying because it forces you to take a back seat when you're used to being an agent of change. The best way that I can illustrate why breaking established rules is so scary is to direct you to the YouTube video unedited footage of a bear and remind you that this 10-minute video was broadcast late at night on Adult Swim in 2014 as an infomercial with absolutely no warning. I'm not going to spoil you on what happens in this video, but understand that when I watched it for the first time, it was one of the most unsettling experiences of my entire life. There's a certain security to watching TV, that when something scary comes on, you know it. Breaking the rules robs you of that security. But it's not just that. Let's take some time to look at the jump scares. A lot of games and movies use jump scares as a quick adrenaline-inducing moment of horror. Quick movement, loud noises, grotesque imagery, all meant to terrify the viewer. The problem is that most games and movies use jump scares wildly ineffectively. Alfred Hitchcock famously said that there is no terror in the bang, only in the anticipation. In other words, jump scares only work if you earn them. You know that feeling when you're watching a movie and you know a jump scare is coming? The main character is going to that back room they shouldn't be in. The music is getting tenser and tenser. There's a scratching noise coming from behind the character and they slowly turn around and then boom, the monster is right there. In that moment, what was legitimately scary was not the monster itself, no matter how well it's designed. It was the buildup, the fraying nerves as you know something's coming, but you have no idea what. The jump scare almost becomes a moment of relief. Now the anticipation, the true terror, is over. The game Detention, released in January of 2017, is actually my favorite use of jump scares ever. It telegraphs them perfectly, so you know something is coming. But just when you know it's time, when all of your horror instincts are telling you to be ready, nothing happens. The tension keeps building. You've been robbed of that release. But just when you start to let your guard down, it hits. Not a monster jumping out at you or a loud scream as the killer rushes you, but subtle, legitimately terrifying moments. They don't give you that relief, that bang that you're waiting for. Instead, you get a gut-wrenching, heart-sinking moment of true terror. In FNaF, the jump scares are not the end game. Everything about this game is meant to build tension. The sound design, the just barely lifeless characters, the grainy images on the camera that force you to pay a bit more attention and get a little bit more invested. This whole game is a study in making your heart pound. Every time the animatronics move, every sound that's just a little out of place, every time you see that you've lost more power, the fear just builds. For a lot of games, the jump scare is the end goal. For FNaF, it's just the icing on top. The real terror is everything else. Loss of control, isolation, uncanny characters, and unsettling sound design. all serve to continually and constantly build tension in these games. Everything about it is intentional and effective, from night 1 giving you a false sense of control and safety, to night 5 painfully and repeatedly reminding you that you never had any real power here. At least it's all just a game, right? I mean, something like this could never be real. Sure, the ghost animatronics and the Freddy spaghetti can't be, but keep in mind that underneath all of that, these games are built on the story of an evil, evil man, killing children for no reason other than because he could, because it made him feel powerful. All of the jump scares and sound effects and glitchy video camera feeds are in service to the story of a vicious and psychotic serial killer. Do you remember the pit in your stomach the first time you saw Afton kill the crying child back in FNaF 2? The absolute horror you felt when you watched Foxy run out to greet those cheering kids, only to find corpses and a gleeful smile on his face? The helplessness when Glitchtrap shoved you into a suit and forced you to play for him while he danced and danced at the thought of another victim? That's real. And it's scarier than any video game. So next time you're all alone at home and the lights are out and you hear a bump in the night, maybe you'll think twice about going to check it out. This is Singularity, and remember to stay curious.